SPC Elias Vance, call sign Static, knew the A Shau Valley by the sound of its sweat-drenched silence. For 3 days, Cobra 3 to 4, a 6-man LRRP unit, had been hugging the muddy slopes, tasting the metallic decay of the earth and the cloying sweetness of rot. Static's world was confined to the damp, heavy weight of the PRC 77 radio strapped to his back and the insistent, muffled chatter filtering through his headset. The silence around them was a lie. The truth was the low, constant hiss of the jungle, punctuated only by the occasional, distant thunder of artillery, a war happening somewhere else, relayed directly into his ears. Lieutenant Reyes, their team leader, a man whose face was perpetually tight with the strain of responsibility, signaled a halt. They had reached their observation point, a heavily fortified canopy overlooking what was supposed to be a small enemy trail intersection. Static settled in, trying to shield the radio from the relentless humidity running through the encryption checks. His job during this phase, the long, agonizing waiting, was a unique psychological torture. He was the nerve ending of the unit, the conduit to civilization and support, yet utterly useless if action required a rifle. He was listening to the weather reports from Da Nang, the mundane logistics of cooks arguing over rations at Key San, and the sporadic, terrifying bursts of panicked voice traffic from other patrols getting hit miles away. He heard the war, but he didn't see it, creating a deep, isolating paranoia that made every shadow look like an approaching blade. The reports he heard were clinical, detached. They never conveyed the smell of burning gunpowder or the look in a dying man's eyes. But today, the chatter shifted. HQ was mentioning increased large-scale movement, codenamed Phoenix Rising, further north than anticipated. Static watched Reyes scan the valley below through binoculars. The waiting was about to break, and Static felt the familiar, cold dread, the terror of knowing he would soon be relaying death, but unable to influence the outcome with his hands, only with his voice. The break came not as a sudden firefight, but as a horrifying realization. After 2 hours of observation, Reyes lowered his binoculars, his face pale beneath the grime. The small intersection was, in fact, the eastern perimeter of a massive, heavily camouflaged NVA logistics staging area, a spiderweb of trails leading to supply caches, field hospitals, and what looked like a subterranean command bunker. This was not a recon mission anymore. It was a discovery that required immediate, overwhelming response. Reyes quietly signaled Sergeant Reyes and the 2 riflemen, Chavez and Miller, to start marking targets with laser designators. The unit needed heavy artillery. Now, Static knew the communication reality. Surrounded by limestone ridges and thick jungle canopy, their standard transmission power wouldn't punch through the interference to reach Hammerhead Actual, the fire support coordinator orbiting 30 clicks out. Reyes pointed upward toward a razor-thin granite outcropping that jutted dangerously above the canopy line, a perfect exposed position. Static nodded, the weight of the radio suddenly feeling like a coffin lid. He had to separate from the protection of the patrol to become their voice. The movement was slow, deliberate, a terrifying crawl toward the exposed light. As he ascended, clinging to roots, the sounds in his headset changed again. He picked up fragments of enemy radio chatter. Quick, clipped Vietnamese, too close, too clear. His blood went cold. They weren't just observing the staging area. They were moving right toward it, and the enemy was active, talking. Static reached the exposed ridge, his uniform snagging on thorny vines. He set down the heavy radio, extended the 3-meter whip antenna, and began dialing in the primary frequency, his hands shaking not from exertion, but from the sudden, terrifying exposure to both the enemy below and the electrical noise above. He needed a clean signal, and the jungle seemed determined to deny him. Static was now completely isolated, a human lightning rod perched on a slab of slick rock. He keyed the transmit switch, calling Hammerhead, "This is Cobra 3 to 4, urgent priority fire mission." The reply was a burst of static, followed by a weak, distorted voice saying only 3 to 4. Say again. Read you barely won by 5. He was too weak, too far, or the terrain was actively swallowing his signal. Hayes, down below, was sending frantic hand signals. Hurry. Static wrestled with the antenna cable, adjusting the tuning dial with agonizing precision, trying to find a sweet spot between white noise and clarity. He knew that every second wasted was a second closer to the enemy discovering their team's presence. Through the interference, he suddenly broke through to a different frequency, accidentally picking up comms from a Marine platoon further west. Their traffic was pure, unadulterated panic. We're overrun. We got sappers and a wire. Request immediate suppression. We are out of ammo. The voice cut out with a sound like tearing fabric. Static held his breath, unable to help them, unable to contact his own crucial target. He was saturated in the death of others. Finally, after a minute that felt like an hour, the green signal light on the PRC-77 flickered strong. He re-established contact with Hammerhead Actual, his voice sounding high-pitched and strained. He began dictating the grid coordinates for the massive supply cache they had spotted, a target vital enough to justify the extreme risk. But as he spoke, detailing the coordinates, his eyes caught movement below the ridge. 3 NVA soldiers, heavily armed, moving off the main trail, their faces upturned, scanning the precise ridge where he sat. They had heard the signal spike. They knew exactly where their throat was. The world exploded not on the ridge where Static was, but 100 meters below, where Cobra 3 to 4 was still marking targets. Static heard the sound of the initial ambush before his brain registered the visual confirmation. It was a dense, wet thwack of an RPG hitting the base of a mahogany tree near the patrol, followed instantly by the staccato, ripping sound of a K-47 fire and the sharper, desperate answering crackle of M16s. Contact, multiple axis. Hayes' voice screamed into the headset, instantly replacing the calm command tone with raw, visceral fear. Static dropped the microphone cord, drawing his M16, torn between the vital necessity of the radio and the instinct to fight. He couldn't see the full scope of the ambush. The canopy was too thick, but he heard the desperate, close-quarters combat happening just out of sight. He keyed the mic, fighting the urge to run. Hammerhead, fire mission, shift left 100, revised coordinates. He was firing the team's coordinates now, not for the supply cache, but for immediate defensive suppression, trying to lay a curtain of steel between his men and the unseen enemy. But the fire support was still too far out. Hayes' mic came alive again, the sound of labored breathing filling Static's ears. We're pinned. Flank left, they're using LMGs. Static, you need to coordinate air support if you can. Static frantically switched frequencies, trying to reach a fast mover frequency, but his hands were slick with sweat and the radio controls became slippery and alien. The auditory nature of the battle was horrifying. He heard the distinct sound of Miller's M16 running dry, followed by a sickening, wet sound and a shout cut short. Static felt a dizzying surge of nausea. He was listening to his teammates die, unable to even identify their attacker, forced into the role of a powerless, remote observer. The firefight morphed from chaotic violence into a desperate, fragmented dialogue with death. Lieutenant Hayes, the command voice, was still transmitting, but the reports were clipped, laced with pain. Static could hear the rounds snapping closer to the field mic, the white noise of near misses. Static, tell them we have 2 down, possibly 3. Chavez is hit bad. Need medevac priority 1. Now dash. Static relayed the message to HQ, his voice cracking. HQ's reply was stark and chilling. Cobra 3 to 4, be advised, enemy saturation in your sector is extreme. No immediate air assets available for extraction. Hold position. Static swallowed the lump in his throat and relayed the grim news. Hayes simply cursed, a ragged, hopeless sound. Then came the final, terrifying sequence. Static heard Hayes' rifle rattling as he reloaded, followed by a burst of automatic fire, louder and closer than before. Hayes shouted a final, desperate instruction, not to Static, but to Sergeant Reyes. Reyes, take lead. Défensive formation Charlie. Pull back to the stream bed. There was a moment of silence, followed by a sound that Static would replay in his nightmares for years. A sudden, sharp, gurgling gasp of air, the sound of a microphone dropping onto damp earth, and then nothing but the steady, heavy thump-thump of his own heart mixing with the static hiss. Hayes was gone. Static felt a moment of blinding panic, the realization hitting him that the chain of command had evaporated, leaving him, the communications man, as the highest-ranking survivor in the middle of a slaughter. He waited, expecting total silence, but then Sergeant Reyes' voice cut through, lower, controlled, but laced with exhaustion. Static, Reyes here. Lieutenant is Kia. Chavez and Miller confirmed Kia. I'm moving toward the emergency extraction point, dragging the dead weight. I'll cover your retreat. Get that radio out. Soldier. That's an order. Run. Reyes' order was a double-edged blade. Salvation for Static, but a sacrificial death sentence for Reyes himself. To cover Static's retreat and allow him time to safely disengage from the ridge, Reyes had to engage the enemy actively, drawing attention away from the exposed RTO. Static grabbed the radio, not bothering to fold the antenna, the brass hitting his spine as he scrambled down the rocks. He didn't look back at the pit of violence where his unit had just been destroyed. His whole existence was reduced to the frantic voice of Reyes in his ear and the sound of his own heavy boots slapping the mud. Reyes was moving, transmitting fragmented tactical updates as he fought a desperate rearguard action. Moving west, taking fire from the right flank. Heavy resistance near the downed chopper site. Static was running blind, navigating treacherous terrain entirely based on the location of the enemy fire that Reyes was describing. He was guided by the sound of the chase. Every time Reyes' voice wavered or his breathing became labored, Static's own momentum faltered. He was the ghost running with the memory of the body they left behind. He realized he was carrying the unit's entire existence. The mission reports, the casualty counts, the frequency of their demise, all trapped in the encrypted data stored in the PRC-77. The radio was heavier now, not just physically, but spiritually. He was trying to follow Reyes' path, but the sergeant was fighting a delaying action, forcing Static onto a parallel, safer trajectory. Reyes' transmissions became slower, more punctuated by the sound of reloading and sharp intakes of breath. Static knew Reyes was slowing down, bleeding out time for him, but maybe bleeding out for real. The waiting, the ultimate duality, was now reversed. Static was fleeing, waiting desperately for the sound of his own extraction signal, while Reyes was actively, knowingly, waiting for his final moment. The pursuit was relentless, though Static never saw his pursuers clearly. They were always just shadows and snapping branches behind the noise of his flight. He was deep in the bamboo thickets now, relying purely on the compass bearing Reyes had given him for the extraction zone. The enemy fire directed at Reyes was noticeably diminishing, replaced by the sound of rapid movement closing the distance. Static realized the enemy was breaking contact with Reyes, not because they had beaten him, but because they had found a fresher, more valuable trail. The lone survivor carrying the radio. Reyes' voice, when it came through, was barely a whisper, ragged and wet. Static, they're past me now. They're on your trail. Keep moving. They'll be on you in 5 minutes. Drop everything but the radio and your rifle. Static ditched his pack, letting the useless weight of water and rations fall away, focusing only on the radio. He was now running on raw adrenaline and the horrifying knowledge that Reyes was no longer fighting for his own life, but solely to give Static this meager head start. Static stumbled, catching himself on a thorny vine, the sudden pain barely registering over the pounding fear in his chest. He keyed the mic, needing to know, "Reyes, what is your status? I'm sending your coordinates to HQ now. You need to hold just 10 more minutes." The wait for the reply was excruciating. When Reyes finally transmitted, the voice was calm, unnervingly so, and completely detached from the tactical reality. It was the haunting moment Static would carry forever. The final, intimate monologue broadcast across military frequencies, meant only for one set of ears. Sergeant Reyes' final transmission was not a combat report, not a coordinate update, but a farewell. Static was running, the headset bouncing against his ear, yet he froze mid-stride to listen to the dying man's confession. Static, Vance, listen to me. Don't waste the bandwidth on me. Just listen. Reyes coughed, a terrible, rattling sound. You tell Maria, my wife, back in El Paso. Tell her I didn't just die for this mud, or for some line on a map. Tell her I died trying to save the radio man, because someone has to tell the story. Tell her about the garden we were going to plant. Roses, white ones, she always wanted white roses. Static's eyes burned. He was listening to the raw, unprotected voice of a man making peace with oblivion, using the military comms system as his confessional box. And my boy, little Oscar, tell him war is noise, and the silence afterwards, that's the real fight. He should never join. Tell him his dad was brave, but mostly he was just tired. Reyes paused, and Static heard the distinct sound of a bolt cycling, the final chambering of a round, followed by a heavy, shuddering exhale. Static tried to speak, tried to scream, Reyes, hold on, but Reyes was already talking over him. I'm out of time, Vance. Just remember the roses. The transmission ended with a single, sharp report of an M16, then immediate, complete silence. Static stood there, panting, the radio now broadcasting only the deep, empty hum of the jungle. He hadn't just heard a man die. He had witnessed the complete, unvarnished surrender of a soldier's mask, replaced by the voice of a husband and father. This wasn't the clean, clinical death reported on paper. It was an echo of profound, lonely loss, trapped forever inside the circuits of the machine he carried. The silence left by Reyes was unbearable, but it served as a perverse spur. The enemy, having found and silenced their immediate obstacle, was now closing in rapidly. Static keyed the mic to HQ, his voice dangerously hoarse. Cobra 3 to 4 actual to Hammerhead, this is Static. All personnel Kia, except RTO. Emergency extraction coordinates transmitted. I am at the HLZ point, repeat, at the HLZ. He had reached the designated landing zone, a small, overgrown clearing beneath a triple canopy layer. Just as HQ acknowledged and confirmed the inbound extraction bird, Vulture 7 to 9 inbound. ETA 3 minutes. The enemy broke cover. 3 NVA soldiers burst from the tree line 50 yards away. The waiting was over. The duality had collapsed. Static was no longer just the listener, the relay, the voice of a unit. He was the last line of defense. He dropped to one knee, the radio digging into his ribs, and opened fire with his M16, aiming the weapon with the same frantic precision he had used to tune the radio frequencies earlier. He fought with one hand, sending short bursts, while the other held the mic, screaming directions to the incoming chopper. Vulture, inbound hot, heavy ground fire, approaching from 3 o'clock. I am taking fire, repeat, taking fire. The sound of the Huey rotors sliced through the air, deafeningly loud. Tracers whizzed past his head, and he felt a sharp, searing pain tear through his left forearm. He stumbled, but kept broadcasting, coordinating the bird's risky approach. The chopper, Vulture 7 to 9, flared hard above the clearing, throwing jumbled debris into the air. The door gunner opened up, turning the enemy position into shredded foliage and wood. Static scrambled toward the ramp, the radio box dragging heavily, ignoring the pain in his arm. He threw himself toward the open door, firing the last few rounds of his magazine back into the trees, the final burst of combat drowning out the noise of Reyes' death. Static was hauled aboard Vulture 7 to 9 by a massive crew chief, the sudden, overwhelming noise of the engine, the rotor wash, and the door gunners firing replacing the tight, humid silence of the jungle. He collapsed onto the floor, his ears ringing, the blood from his arm dripping onto the aluminum decking. He was the only one. 6 went in, 1 came out. The crew chief tried to remove his headset, but Static violently resisted, still clutching the microphone. He keyed the mic one last time, cutting through the electronic noise of the retreating bird. Hammerhead, Cobra 3 to 4 reports mission failure. Unit effectively destroyed. Kia reports pending. He transmitted the final sterile assessment, the official version of the story. Then, as the chopper gained altitude, pulling away from the slaughter below, Static finally released the microphone. He ripped the headset off, expecting the engine noise to be the loudest sound, but it wasn't. The true noise was the silence in his memory, the absolute void left after Sergeant Reyes' voice had faded. He stared at the portable reel-to-reel recorder unit attached to the PRC-77, the tiny, waterproof box that had faithfully recorded every second of the last 48 hours, every tactical report, every explosion, and every syllable of Reyes' final words about white roses and tired fathers. The box held the truth that official reports would never contain. Static closed his eyes, the memory of Reyes' calm, defeated voice filling the vast emptiness left by the battle. The war was noise, but the silence, the absolute, profound silence that followed the recording of a dying man's love, that was the echo that would haunt him forever.